You might have caught this kind of surprising headline recently.
Oh, yeah. Which one?
About the U.S. apparently fast-tracking refugee status, but specifically for white South Africans.
Right, under the Trump administration. Yeah, that definitely raised some eyebrows.
Exactly. It throws up a whole load of questions, doesn't it, about, South Africa today, U.S. policy, how different groups are feeling.
Absolutely. And that's what we want to dig into today. It's a really complex picture. You've got U.S. policy bumping up against post-apartheid South Africa.
And all these different viewpoints from people actually living there.
Precisely. So our mission, really, for you listening, is to get past that headline. We need to understand why this is happening, what the different sides are saying.
Yeah, why are some people wanting to leave as refugees? Why does the South African government completely disagree? And interestingly, why are others determined to stay, maybe looking for different answers?
And we're basing this deep dive mainly on a pretty detailed CNN piece from May 21st, 2025. It lays out the different facets quite well.
Okay, sounds good. So let's start with the U.S. side of things. What's the policy exactly?
Well, the CNN article points out it's very targeted. The administration seems to have sped up the process specifically for Afrikaner refugees.
While putting others on hold.
That's what's reported, yeah. Applications from other places seem to be paused, while this specific group is getting expedited.
And the reason given, I think President Trump himself commented.
He did. The justification cited was, frankly, stark. Claims of genocide, brutal killings, and land confiscation aimed at white farmers.
Wow. Those are incredibly serious claims. Genocide.
Extremely serious. And predictably, that's where you get immediate pushback from the South African government.
They deny it completely.
Strongly. The South African Police Service put out a statement, mentioned in the article, saying, look, in the last quarter of 2024, only one farmer identified as white was killed.
Only one.
And they cautioned against jumping to conclusions based on the past, basically saying farm murders aren't automatically race-based attacks on white people.
But the crime statistics themselves are disputed, aren't they?
Yeah, that's another layer of complexity. The article mentions AfriForum, that's an Afrikaner advocacy group. They challenged those police numbers for the same period. They reported higher figures.
And could CNN verify AfriForum's numbers?
No, the article states CNN couldn't independently verify them, but it does give the broader context. The government acknowledges around 20,000 murders a year overall.
Which is tragically high.
It is. And local reporting apparently suggests most victims nationally are black. So you see this real divergence in how crime stats are being framed and interpreted depending on who you ask.
And this whole disagreement, it's spilling over into diplomacy.
Big time. The article mentions a planned meeting between President Ramaphosa and President Trump in Washington. The goal, to reframe bilateral economic and commercial relations.
Reframe sounds like diplomatic code for things are tense.
Pretty much. Especially since this meeting came after the U.S. had frozen aid to South Africa, citing these very concerns about how the white minority was being treated.
And wasn't there something about the ambassador, too?
Yes. South Africa's ambassador to the U.S. was expelled. The reported reason. Critical comments about Trump's Make America Great Again movement.
Okay, so definite strain there. Now, what about the people actually seeking refuge? Are we talking about large numbers?
Well, the South African Chamber of Commerce in the USA, SASC USA, they're quoted saying at least 67,000 South Africans showed interest in U.S. refugee status.
67,000 expressing interest. That's significant.
It is. And it's not just interest. The article gives a concrete example. 59 white South Africans who actually arrived and were granted refugee status in the U.S.
So the policy is actively being used by some.
Correct. Now, flip that coin. How does the South African government see these people arriving in the U.S.?
President Ramaphosa had some strong words, didn't he?
Very strong. He essentially said they do not fit the bill for refugee status. His view is they aren't fleeing actual persecution as defined legally.
He didn't stop there, though.
No. He reportedly called those leaving cowards, said they were opposing his government's efforts to undo apartheid's legacy to tackle that deep-seated inequality.
That's quite a statement from a head of state about citizens leaving.
It is. And you have to see it alongside their domestic policies, particularly the Expropriation Act.
Ah, yes, the Land Reform Act. That's hugely controversial.
Hugely. Enacted in January, it allows the government, in certain cases, to take land for redistribution without compensation. The stated goal is addressing historical injustice.
And the scale of that injustice is?
Well, the CNN article puts the numbers starkly. Black South Africans, over 80% of the population, own about 4% of private land. Whites. around 72%.
4% versus 72%. That really puts the drive for land reform into perspective.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
It's the essential backdrop. So you have this government push to correct historical wrongs.
And a segment of the white population feeling vulnerable enough to leave, while the government says that's not persecution, that's addressing inequality.
Exactly. A real clash of narratives. But as the article points out, not everyone is looking to leave. There's another path some are taking.
Right. This brings us to Orania. Tell us about that.
Orania is this settlement in the Northern Cape, self-described as Afrikaner only. And they're pursuing a very different idea. Autonomy, maybe even independence within South Africa.
How autonomous are they now?
Pretty significantly, it seems.
Yeah.
The article says they generate about half their own power, collect local taxes, have their own currency pegged to the rand.
For a small community, what, 3,000 people?
Around that, yeah, on about 19,800 acres. So it's quite developed in terms of self-management.
And they want more than just local control.
Oh, yes. Juice Stridham, one of their leaders, is quoted saying they want recognition as an independent state. They even sent a delegation to the U.S. to make their case.
Really? Lobbying in the U.S.?
Apparently so.
Yeah.
Stridham mentioned ongoing, though, low-profile talks with government officials. His message to the U.S. was basically, help us here, not take us in as refugees.
Help them achieve statehood within South Africa.
That seems to be the goal. And they argue there's a basis for this. They point back to the 1994 post-apartheid agreement.
What did that say?
It acknowledged the principle of Afrikaner self-determination, even floated the idea of a Volksstaat, a people's state.
So they see a historical, maybe even legal justification.
That's their argument. And you hear from residents in the article, people like Kara Tomlinson.
What does she say?
She talks about wanting to preserve her language, her culture, her God-given identity as an Afrikaner. She feels she'd lose that if she went to America.
And others feel similarly.
Yeah, another resident, Cyril Ramaphosa, a retired minister, talks about the quiet, solitary life in Orania. Though he does acknowledge they might face hostility outside the settlement.
Which brings us to the controversy. Orania isn't universally popular.
Far from it. The article notes criticism from groups like the Economic Freedom Fighters, who see the Afrikaner-only policy as exclusionary, basically neo-apartheid.
And the official government line.
The South African Foreign Ministry is clear. Orania has no status as a nation within a nation. It's subject to South African law, period. So their path is definitely challenging.
Okay, so we have those seeking refuge, those seeking autonomy. What about farmers just trying to live and work the land?
The article includes that vital perspective, too, through the experience of a farmer named Adrian Vos.
What happened to him?
His story is harrowing. He's in Gauteng province. He was shot. His farmhouse was pillaged, then set on fire.
Just horrific. Did he know why? Was it racially motivated?
He couldn't say for sure what the motive was, but he did say it fits a pattern of farm attacks as part of the reality in a country with, such a high murder rate overall.
But despite that violence, is he planning to leave?
No, that's what's striking. He's determined to stay. He said South Africa is all he knows, and he feels responsible for his land.
He just wants things to be safer.
Exactly. He was hoping the meeting between Ramaphosa and Trump might lead to the South African government doing more to protect farmers, all farmers, a plea for safety and security.
So wrapping this up, it's clear there's no single story here.
Not at all. You've got the U.S. perspective, offering refuge based on perceived persecution.
The South African government strongly refuting that, focused on addressing deep historical inequalities.
And then within the Afrikaner community itself, you have people making vastly different choices. Some leaving, some digging in to build Orania.
And others like Mr. Vos just wanting to farm safely in the country they consider home.
It's incredibly complex. And you absolutely cannot understand any of it without grappling with the legacy of apartheid, especially around land.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? When you hear all these perspectives, what does it actually mean for a group to feel safe, to feel secure in their homeland?
Yeah, and what role can outsiders like the U.S. or other countries really play in these kinds of deep internal situations? Is it helpful? Can it be counterproductive?
Lots to ponder there about self-determination, minority rights, and how you deal with the ghosts of history.